An angel is generally a supernatural being found in various religions and mythologies. Abrahamic religions often depict angels as benevolent celestial beings who act as intermediaries between God or heaven and humanity. Other roles of angels include protecting and guiding human beings and carrying out tasks on behalf of God.
But are angels for real, or just a psychological manifestation of the human brain known as the third man effect, as some researchers are beginning to think? That's what we set out to uncover in this episode of
Is That For Real?
Perfect.
So, there's a little bit of background for you. But do angels really exist? Or is it just a third man syndrome, a psychological creation of the survival mode of the mind in order to keep us safe? What do you think, Diasis? Do you believe in angels?
I don't know. I think there's something out there.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be angels and demons as, the way that the Bible describes it, but I don't know. Who am I to say?
I've heard a lot of different things about them, like that, the traditional biblical, they're from God. And not just from the Bible, because they go into many other religions, all the way back to like Zoroastrianism, much older than the Bible. They believed in the sons of God. And that old story in the Bible where you've got the three Hebrews who are put into the burning fiery furnace. And
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
That's right. And if you want to show off your real biblical skills, it's Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael were their Hebrew names. Aha! I remember that because Shadrach.
I was about to say that, John. You beat me to it. I was just about to say that.
Yeah, those were their Babylonian names. But if you're really a Bible nerd, you know their Hebrew names too. But even in that account, the king of Babylon sees the angel in the furnace and refers to him as one of the sons of God, which would actually make sense under Babylonian Zoroastrianism because they believed in angels too. It's way older than just the Bible.
Babylon pretty much invented everything.
Pretty much, yeah. Most everything came out of Babylon, yeah. Mm-hmm. But what do people believe in the United States about angels? A lot of people believe in angels, and
I would say most of them believe in angels.
And you would be right.
Yeah.
We got some statistics on it, and so let's roll that segment, and then we'll talk about it. According to an Associated Press Growth from Knowledge poll taken in 2011, 77% of Americans believe in angels. Belief is primarily tied to religion, with 88% of Christians, 95% of evangelical Christians, and 94% of those who attend weekly religious services of any sort saying they believe in angels.
But belief in angels is fairly widespread, even among the less religious. A majority of non-Christians think angels exist, as do more than 4 in 10 of those who never attend religious services. Beyond the religious gap, women are more likely than men to believe angels are real, and those over 30 are more apt than younger adults to think they exist. So I can't figure out why, across the board, it seems like women are more into spirituality than men. I mean, even I know a lot of people that are into tarot and into astrology. And the vast majority of my friends on social media who are into this are women.
Yeah.
And, there's a parallel here.
I don't
believe in angels.
I don't know why that is. I just know that every survey I see, every religious survey always shows that women are at least somewhat more religious.
Somebody needs to investigate that.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we should. But not in this episode. But the bottom line is the vast majority of Americans believe in angels. 77%. Now, here's the thing I didn't get. It's the poll. It was Associated Press Growth from Knowledge poll. So this is a legit poll. 95% of evangelical Christians believe in angels. Who are the other 5%? How can you be an evangelical Christian and not believe in angels? I just don't understand that. Isn't that kind of like par for the course? It's part of the package.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought about that. But only 88% of Christians overall believe in angels, which that kind of makes sense to me because I used to go to a church that was super liberal and they accepted like everybody and everything, totally LGBT inclusive. They even had an atheist deacon. And so they accepted all walks.
Let's just throw it all in there.
It was very community driven, a lot of charitable stuff, that sort of thing. So I could see why very progressive churches would have some people who don't believe in angels but call themselves Christians. But the evangelicals, I just don't understand.
That's wow.
But even 4 in 10 who never attend any religious services in the U.S. believe in angels. So it's very widespread, very popular. If you ever go to any bookstore and go to the spirituality section, there's going to be a whole wall just devoted to angels. Angels are big deal in the U.S. They really are. So that didn't surprise me at all.
I mean, you see decorations of them everywhere. I mean,
yeah.
Still, even in this progressive culture, angels are still huge.
Yep. Guardian angels, big deal. Lots of people believe in guardian angels. You know.
I don't know, man. I mean, that just seems so gaudy. I have my own, very own guardian angel.
Well, you know me, I'm completely skeptical about the whole thing, but we watched a documentary, and I strongly encourage anyone who has any interest in the subject to check this out. It's only 45 minutes.
It was interesting.
It was. National Geographic used to have a show called Explorer. How original. Yeah. And one of the episodes is called The Angel Effect. And they go through the, not really for and against. It seems like it was pretty heavily bent in the against side.
Yeah.
But they interview people who've had experiences they believed were angels, and they interview a bunch of scientists, which just makes sense that National Geographic would lean in that direction. But it's very interesting.
Have like Richard Dawkins pop up describing your angelic experience.
This doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, no, he wasn't in it. He wasn't in it. So if you're a Dawkins fan, he's not going to show up. But a bunch of other people do. And so first what we're going to do is we're going to go through a number of experiences that people have claimed to have involving either angels or something akin to angels, and then we'll go through what the scientists, and one of them we've covered before in the Ghosts and Parapsychology episode, Michael Persinger, may he rest in peace, he died in 2018. The others are all still alive as far as I could tell from the information I picked up. But he studied parapsychology extensively, and so we'll talk about him in the against side. But in the for side, first we're going to start off with a guy named Ron DeFrancisco, or Cisco, I think it's Cisco. And he is a 9/11 survivor, and his story is very interesting and sad, and includes what he believes was an angel. So let's go ahead and roll that, and then we'll talk about it.
Ron DeFrancisco was the last person to escape the South Tower on 9/11 and survive. Seconds before the plane hit the tower, he got a call from a friend warning him to get out immediately. Ron went down the emergency stairwell along with some of his co-workers from the stock exchange floor. The fire started to rise up the stairwell, forcing them to turn around and go back up the stairs. By the time they got to the 91st floor, people once again turned around and headed back down. With much of the oxygen depleted by the fire, people began to lay down on the stairs and fall asleep.
At this time, Ron claims that somebody called to him and told him to get up and helped him up. The being told him to force his way down through the stairs. I don't want to sound kooky, he said, but the presence brought me through the flames. Ron went 3 floors down, burned but alive, and made his way down the 1,500 steps to the lobby. Debris and bodies were falling from the towers, preventing him from leaving the building. 56 minutes later, the building collapsed, shortly after he was instructed to leave. A fireball hit him and knocked him down. 3 days later, he woke up in the hospital. Ron believes he was saved by an angel from God. Whether it was an angel or some trick of psychology or whatever, that dude escaped by the skin of his teeth. I mean, that whole situation is terrible and harrowing and whatever. But man, he just barely made it out. 15 through flames. He had to walk through the flames to get down. What do you make of that? You think he really saw an angel? You're sort of on the believer side, sort of.
Kind of. I don't know. I think that his mind motivated him to do what it needed to do to get him out of that situation.
Yeah. So you think he invented the third man?
Maybe. Not going to say for sure. I mean, we don't know. We weren't there. But, how come it didn't appear to him? How come it didn't, you didn't see the white light with the wings he didn't this way?
He didn't see that, but he did see a figure.
You will make it down. Yeah. Trust me. Just keep going. I don't know. It just seems a little too abstract for me to believe that it was tangible.
Yeah, I get it. He described it as a being that led him down through the stairs, through the flames, whatever. Now, once we get to the skeptical side, the scientists or some neuroscientists have what they believe is an explanation for this. But even knowing those things, Ron here believes that it was like God's grace. The question I always ask, and we talked about this while we were watching the documentary, the episode from National Geographic. If it was an angel, why him and not all the other people in the stairwell?
Yeah, I remember we were having trouble making sense of a lot of it.
Yeah.
It was an interesting experience.
That's always been my problem, though. And you were talking about how, and you've said this before, like the universe chooses, whatever, whoever it wants, however.
Yeah.
But why him and not the other people? What was wrong with them that they didn't deserve to live? Well, the one thing I think of, too, whatever,
is one thing that they talked about in that documentary, why does it always seem to happen in bad circumstances?
Yes.
How come they don't just chill with you and have a beer with you one day and just hang with you?
Yep. Like I said when we were watching it, no one's ever having lunch with an angel.
Yeah.
It's never that. It's always in a stress-induced, high-danger survival situation. And being a skeptic to begin with, that definitely pushes my radar way over to the skeptical side.
Although there is an interesting experience. And Mom, I know you're watching. Victoria, my sister, I know you're watching. So, hey, my mom had an interesting experience with my sister. Before my sister was born and before she knew it was going to be a girl, my mom had a dream that she was laying in bed and an angel came down holding a baby, and my mom knew it was going to be her daughter. You know how dreams are. You just know stuff. And the angel said, "Please take care of Victoria Page." And it was my sister. So that was one supposed angel experience, maybe.
See, now I've had a few of these, and I've told you about them, and I'll go through, and I won't call them angel experiences, though. Just, I practice mindfulness meditation. It's purely secular. It's my way of bringing peace to my days, and it's highly effective for me. I don't know if it's just my personality type, but it really works. And so I've had some really weird things happen, and one is I was drifting asleep. We were about to move into this house.
Yes.
Yeah. And
thank you.
You've been wanting me to tell us.
Y'all got to hear this. Yes, I have.
I was drifting asleep. The next day, I was going to start moving stuff into the house that we're in now, where our lovely 10 by 10 foot tiny room studio exists. And I'm falling asleep.
He's being modest.
I'm falling asleep. I hear a voice. Now, I'm used to this because I've practiced lucid dreaming in the past. We'll do an episode on that. I keep saying, and we will. We are going to cover it.
We promise. We mean it this time.
I know that as you're falling asleep, you fall into the hypnagogic state. And we've talked about that, too, in the Ghosts and Parapsychology episode, where you literally can hear and see things as if you were in your waking time.
That shit is
they
so
seem very
weird.
real. So I'm falling asleep, and I see what I can only describe in what the word that pops in my head as an angel. Now, it's not really like your traditional angel. It's kind of like a light being with sort of face. It's hard to describe, and it's been a while. And it tells me that I'm going to believe, and keep in mind, we're deep in studying this stuff, so I got psychological explanations for everything that happened, except one. So I'm falling asleep, he's telling me that I'm going to believe, and I'm having a conversation with this light being, which I'm going to call a dream or hypnagogic state. And I said, okay, well, how? I'm like, how am I going to believe? And it tells me that I'm going to prick this finger, this one, the next day. And, well, no. At first it says you're going to get an injury. And I'm like, oh, hold on now. Yeah. I don't want to believe that much. Don't be hurting me.
Just so you know we're for real or something like that.
Then it says, no, it's just going to be a little prick on your first finger. I'm like, okay, well, fine, whatever. And I fall asleep. All right. Next morning, I've totally forgotten about this because it used to happen all the time when I was lucid dreaming, and I don't put any stock in anything that happens while I'm falling asleep since doing that. I start loading up my wife Beth's paintings because she's an artist in addition to having a degree in psychology, in addition to being a life coach, in addition to being a certified tutor. The woman is definitely the brains in the family. I mean, she's awesome. And I load up her paintings into the back of the car, and I make the first trip because we're only moving like a mile away. We just needed an extra room in the house because she had finished her degree, and she's starting to work from home. I get to the house, and I open the hatch, and I reach in to grab the paintings. Totally had forgotten about the dream, not even worried about it. Pull the paintings out and prick this little finger with a little splinter, and it draws blood. And all of those things is what the angel told me was going to happen. Now, I have an explanation for everything except the little finger, because I swear to you, I did not for 1 second instance, I did not put any stock in it. I didn't believe it. I wasn't concerned with it. Wasn't thinking about it. Nothing. And boom, got a prick on my finger. Now, I can only
That's the kind of stuff that makes me wonder.
What I wonder is, like, is there something subconscious that's, like, might be thinking about it even though I'm not? Your mind's
like, oh, must prick finger to validate dream.
Yeah, it's something like that, that might cause that. Because at the time, we were deep in studying. I believe this is when we were deep in studying the parapsychology episode. And so maybe that's what caused it. But regardless, it was fascinating and very interesting. So I wanted to share that story. You've been wanting me to tell it anyway.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad you did.
Yeah.
It reminds me of another dream that my mom had. So, since we're talking about all this angel stuff, and this was kind of a highway to heaven moment, which, wow, damn good show, guys. If you're into 80s television, you think Knight Rider and Miami Vice was good, watch Highway to Heaven. I've seen literally every episode.
What's his name again?
You got John Smith and you got Mark. I forget Mark's last name, but I mean, they ride around, all this divine intervention. It's a damn good show. Damn good 80s television.
I thought Constantine
Michael
was
Landon.
Awesome. Have you seen Constantine?
No, I haven't seen that.
You haven't seen? You got to watch Constantine, dude. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I have to check that out. So, my grandfather died. My grandfather died in 1995 on my mom's side. And I've talked about him before on the show. Anybody who knows me knows I was very, very close to my grandfathers. I was close to one of my grandmothers too, but very close to my grandfathers. The night that my grandfather died, my mom has a dream. It was kind of one of those lucid things too,
Yeah,
where
sure.
what is that? The hypnagogic state.
Yeah.
She was dozing off.
Mm-hmm.
And again, hard to determine, how real that is for all the skeptics out there in this state, because stuff feels very real in this state. So, my mom's dozing off. And supposedly, she feels a bump at her leg, kind of like just a...
Right.
And my mom turns around, and it's my grandfather. And he says, "I just want to thank you for all these years that you took care of me." And he walks off. It's really interesting.
I know from experience.
The night he died.
A lot of that stuff happens in the hypnagogic state.
It does.
A lot of that
does.
stuff happens. Because I used to have those experiences there. And I used to be, we talk about this all the time, I used to be like a real hardcore Christian. And so I believed a lot of that stuff. And when you already are predisposed to believe, remember sheep goat effect, when you're predisposed to believe.
My mom is very religious, even still.
She's very religious. It tends to incline people to see and experience things that other people would not. Which does make it odd that I experienced the angel thing and the finger prick, because I don't believe any of it. So that's very interesting. All right, now let's talk about the next guy. This one is rough. Man, remember the ICC guy?
Oh, yeah.
This guy's name is Sir Ernest Shackleton, explorer of the early 20th centuries. Very harrowing story. And we'll roll that, and then we'll talk about it. Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton was an Irish Antarctic explorer who led 3 British expeditions to the Antarctic. He was one of the principal figures of the period known as the Heroic Age of Antarctic exploration. On one of his expeditions in 1915, his ship, the Endurance, departed from South Georgia for the Weddell Sea on December 5th, heading for Vassal Bay. As the ship moved southward navigating in ice, first-year ice was encountered, which slowed progress. Deep in the Weddell Sea, conditions gradually grew worse until, on January 19, 1915, the Endurance became frozen fast in an ice floe. On February 24th, realizing that she would be trapped until the following spring, Shackleton ordered the abandonment of the ship's routine and her conversion to a winter station.
She drifted slowly northward with the ice through the following months. When spring arrived in September, the breaking of the ice and its later movements put extreme pressures on the ship's hull. On October 24th, water began pouring in. After a few days, Shackleton gave the order to abandon ship. The men, provisions, and equipment were transferred to camps on the ice. Shackleton knew they would have to reach a whaling station 600 miles away, including 24 miles across icy land. During the land trek, Shackleton said that a mysterious presence guided them to the safety of the whaling station at Stromness on May 20th. He was so damn cold, even his brains were fried. His brains were frozen. It wasn't working right.
Man, let it go. You get the reference, right?
Wait. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Let it go. All
Let
right.
it go.
This guy was interesting. 24 miles across frozen icy land after hundreds of miles on that little
Hell,
boat.
that alone was a miracle.
Yeah. Maybe an angel was
Maybe
involved. The fact that those guys lived to see
Carried
another
your
day.
ass 24 miles.
And he said a mysterious presence guided him through it. It's crazy, Thought it was a real thing.
I can't completely wipe that one off the table because, 24 miles is long enough. 24 miles exhausted in the Antarctic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with hell no. I would have just died. I would have just told that same angel, look, man, you can just take my ass on up. Let's go.
Yeah, when I was looking him up on Wikipedia and reading a detailed version of his story, they only packed enough supplies for, I believe it was 30 days, because they left some other people back at the camp, and they were trying to go get help is what it amounted to. And they only got one boat, the best boat, and they made some modifications to it because they had a carpenter and all this to make it survive the trip, and they did. But they only took 30 days because he said, if we don't make it in 30 days, we're all dead anyway. So we're not going to take more food from the other camp. So, man, that guy was a tough dude. All those people, like, they don't make them like that anymore, These guys, they were the, like, real explorers of the early 20th century.
It's like power steering? You mean my hands?
Yeah, and it's called the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. And that ain't no lie. That dude's very heroic to do all that stuff. But he thought it was an angel. He really thought it was an angel. Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
And there's an author we're going to talk about just a little bit once we get on the other side of this, who has documented more than 200 of these kinds of experiences. And he wrote a book called The Third Man, because that's what he refers to it as. All these people see the third man, this other person that wasn't there.
I got another actual, experience about that.
Sure.
So I have a friend who was diving back in the day. God, this is 20-something years ago, but we were sitting here talking about this and this whole mysterious force and just being out in the wilderness. So he was diving or something, and something ended up happening where he was drowning, and he didn't know what to do. God, I forgot his name too. Like I said, this is a friend of the family, and this happened 20-something years ago, but I always thought it was a really neat story, if it was true. But he was drowning, and he said God spoke to him. And that's all right. That's how that subject came up, because we were talking about God or something. He's like, yeah, he spoke to me once, right? And I was like, what do you mean God spoke to you? And he started talking about this trip he was on where he was out in the ocean, fishing or something, and he was drowning. And he's like, Lord, what do I do? Or he said something about, Lord, please, or God, help me. What do I do? And he said he heard a voice. He said, it's one word, try. But he was drowning, and he was like, oh, God, Lord, help me. What do I do? Try. And he put himself together, pulled himself back together, and he was alive.
Interesting. The voice thing, because Michael Persinger has something to say about that we'll get into once we're on the other side. But that is actually an excellent segue into the next segment, because this person, Stephanie Schwab, is a geomicrobiologist and an underwater cave diver, and she had an experience with an
perfect
angel.
Timing.
Mm-hmm. So
angelic timing.
Divine timing. All right, well, let's roll that one, and then we'll talk about it.
Stephanie Schwab is a geomicrobiologist and an underwater cave diver. A few weeks after the death of her husband, she went for a dive into a cave to prove to herself that she still had the nerve to do the work. Cave divers use a guideline to help them navigate their way back out of dark and confusing caves, and Schwab had used one as well. After 30 minutes in the cave, she turned and prepared to leave, but could not find the guideline. Her husband usually took care of the guidelines, and she had been careless.
In a panic, she searches for the guideline until her oxygen dwindles to a mere 5 minutes remaining. Suddenly, the cave began to brighten, and she felt a presence with her that reminded her of her late husband. The brightness of the cave allowed her to find the guideline and make her way out of the cave and back to the surface. Whether it was spiritual or biochemical, she said, it calmed me enough to find my way out. So far, of all these segments that we've played, I think that one would probably freak me out the most.
Yeah. Being
underwater in a cave, your air's almost out, and you can't find the guideline.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me that the presence she felt, like these other ones we've read so far, it wasn't anybody they knew, right? It was just the third man, some other being, some other presence. But Schwab said that she felt like it was the presence of her husband who had died 2 weeks earlier, also a diver, and who was usually responsible for the guidelines.
Right.
So that was interesting to me, that she felt like it was him, whereas the other two, it was just some random being, angel, whatever you want to call it. What do you make of that?
Well, that's an interesting one. I can tell you, we have a lot of those caves in Florida where I'm from because we have a lot of spring activity.
Oh, right, because this was the Bahamas, and that's right next door,
right next door.
Yeah.
In the springs, in the Florida Springs, there's a lot of caves, and there's a large network of them. And that is no joke that when you lose your guideline, I mean, I've never been a diver, but I've had friends who dive. And I'm going to tell you about something. There's a spring that I used to swim in. And these two divers got lost in it. And they never found them. Two divers went into one of these caves. And I think they went in there without a guideline.
Oh,
and no one ever found them again. They just disappeared.
Yeah.
So
in the documentary,
losing your guideline is not good.
Man, just the footage they showed in the documentary, and I've seen
you
other.
Don't want to do that.
I've seen other underwater caves, right? And they're like puzzles.
Yeah,
you're never going to find everything looks the same.
Yeah.
No way you get out of there. And plus you have a limited amount of light from the flashlight.
If you go to Ruby Falls in Tennessee, Chattanooga, it's beautiful. And this isn't an underwater cave, although there are sections of it that are underwater. It's a damn maze. You could get lost in there and die so easy it's not even funny. Because it's just that big and spacious. I mean, it's like you said, it's a maze.
Yeah. There's one not too far from here, outside of Boone.
Really?
Because we're in North Carolina, in case you don't remember that. And I brought my kids there. And it was really long and winding. Yeah. Of course, they have a guided tour for that one.
And then you think about that being underwater on top of it. Yeah.
When they turn off the lights, because they have the lights that are pegged into the wall all the way down, but they want you to see what true black really is when you're in the middle of the cave. So they turn off the lights.
No, thank you.
I wasn't thinking. My daughter had worn her little shoes. Every time she takes a step, they light up and flash.
Yeah.
And she's like 5 years old. I can't make her stand still. So she's stepping in the cave while the lights we're supposed to be experiencing absolute darkness, and all you see are my kids' shoes.
But I bet as dark as it was still probably lighting it up.
Yeah, it did. Oh, it was like super lit because it was the only light.
Man, that kind of shit is so dark you can hear it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You ever been in something so dark you can actually hear the darkness? It's like, whoa.
The fish go blind that live in the streams in these caves.
Their damn eyes pop out of their head.
Eyes.
It's that dark.
Sight serves no purpose in that kind
darkness. Shadow people live there. It's so dark.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Check out that episode.
That was a good episode.
Damn it.
All right, now we've got another one. This is our last angel experience. This one is Dr. Jerry Linenger, a NASA astronaut, and he's got something to say about what happened to him when he was on the space station in 1997. So let's go ahead and roll that, and then we'll talk about it. Dr. Jerry Linenger is a retired captain in the United States Navy Medical Corps and a former NASA astronaut who flew on the Space Shuttle and Space Station Mir. In 1997, he spent a total of 132 days, 4 hours, and 1 minute in space, the longest duration flight of an American male at that time. Dr. Linenger stated that 3 times during his 5-month stay on Mir, he wasn't sure he was going to survive. The space station was old and in constant need of maintenance and repair to keep it in orbit. It was stressful and lonely, his only 2 companions being 2 Russian cosmonauts that barely spoke any English. Dr. Linenger spent 1 hour each day on a treadmill, daydreaming of Earth. 3 months in, while on the treadmill, he became aware of his father's presence, telling him, "Jerry, you're doing great."
Dr. Linenger says he is a scientist, and he understands the psychological defense mechanisms that the mind can produce in times of great stress, but believes that the presence of his father was in fact real. This was a very interesting segment because I couldn't help but think about your experience with something very similar, and you guys should definitely hear this one. This is a really good experience.
Yeah, sure. I really related to this segment more than any of the others because Dr. Linenger basically had a conversation with his father, right? And like I said earlier, I practice mindfulness meditation. And once you practice mindfulness for quite a while, and I've been doing this for about 2 years pretty intensely, stuff starts to happen during your sessions of mindfulness. And so it's not a surprise, but I had one real wow moment that makes me totally understand why Dr. Linenger fully believes this was his father. I get why he believes that because, all right, at the previous house, I went outside in the evening, it was dark, to do my mindfulness session. I had a tumbler of good whiskey. Because, you know, I don't drink the cheap stuff.
That's right.
It was Macallan 12.
Tony approved.
Yeah, Tony approved.
Inside joke.
And for some reason, I felt like listening to the Bette Midler song, Wind Beneath My Wings, which I almost never listen to because it's not my style of music. But that song reminds me of my father because my father was very much like in the background helping me to achieve things but never wanted any credit for anything. And he died in 2015 for those of you who don't already know. So I'm sitting down, I'm listening to Wind Beneath My Wings, and I'm taking a sip of whiskey and I'm in presence, you know, mindfully in presence. And I just had like this crazy moment where I felt like I was in a large bubble, like my whole reality was only a bubble. And it's very hard to describe, but I'm going to do my best. And the bubble was fractured in one place. And it felt like everything outside the fracture, which was maybe 30 feet away by the trees that were in front of me, because I'm sitting on the back porch and looking at the trees, like everything beyond that, like there was some other thing, some other reality beyond that. I'm just describing how it felt, not what I think was really going on. And in that moment, I felt the presence of my father sitting next to me on the bench. And I kid you not, you know, when you're around people you care about or you've known for a very long time, when they're sitting next to you in the room, they have a certain presence, a certain air about them that's unique to them. And where you can kind of know it's them, even if your eyes are shut and you don't see them.
Energy.
There's certain smells, there's certain feels, there's just something about them. And that makes sense because every human being
Different people have different energy.
Yeah, a certain signature. We attract different amounts of electromagnetism or whatever. And so it makes sense from my skeptical brain that I would know what my father's presence feels like. But I swear to you, if I was not a skeptic, I would absolutely 100% believe in spirits that come back or that continue on after death because it felt like my father's sitting right next to you. And even though I'm a skeptic and even though I don't believe, I was bawling my head off because it felt like Dad was right there with me. So when Dr. Linenger...
It had to feel real.
It felt 100%
for it to affect you like that.
Because
I know you, John, and you're pretty damn skeptical.
And I am not an emotional person either.
No, this guy is grounded as hell.
Yeah, that's true.
Earth sign, Capricorn, ISTJ, INTJ. I mean, across the board, stable, grounded, logical.
Yep. It was as real as you sitting next to me now.
Yeah.
So I get it. And
I don't even think I've had an experience like that.
Yeah, that was the realest one I've had so far. Like the angel one, I immediately, even during the thing, I figured it was a hypnagogic state as I'm falling asleep. But this kind of thing pushes your skepticism. It pushes the boundaries of your skepticism and makes you wonder, even if just for a little bit, to your you come out of it and your brain starts making up all the excuses for why it couldn't have been real, or reaches for all the reasons why it wasn't real and why your brain is doing this to you. But I totally understand why Dr. Linenger said, even though he's a scientist and he understands all the psychology and blah, 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 he just doesn't believe that that's what it was. He really believed it was his father. I get it. I get it.
Well, and who are we to say that it wasn't?
Worldview, can't prove it. It was in his head. All the skeptics, myself included, will say, nah, that's not what it was. It was just all these things we're about to talk about on the against side. But you can't prove objectively.
No, you can't say it wasn't that.
You can't say. You can't prove it. And you'll never prove it to the believer. They absolutely
I have yet, and it's funny too, as many things as I have felt and seen and experienced and been around, I have yet to have one of those experiences like this mindfulness moment with your father, or the dream that you had.
Yeah.
I would love to experience something like that.
Mindfulness,
I've yet
dude.
to,
You got to get into
it has yet to happen to me.
An intense mindfulness meditation practice. It makes all that sort of thing happen. So if you want to experience
have a Master Yoda moment, huh?
Yeah.
Splinter.
I do no drugs. I do no psychedelics. No. None of that came into play. So it wasn't that at all. It was. I attribute all of it to the state that mindfulness meditation puts your brain into. That I really do, and lucid dreaming. Because the hypnagogic state that happens all the time when you're practicing lucid dreaming.
Or, before we go to the next section here, or maybe the mindfulness that you did activated a part of your mind that is able to interpret or receive different types of energy or information around you that maybe the conscious, regular, everyday mind can't do. Maybe you became somewhat of an antenna, or
I am highly skeptical of that, but I will admit, we talked about this before again on the parasite, because this coincides a lot with the parapsychology.
You were able to see another dimension where he was able to communicate with you, or you could feel his presence, which may have been there all along, that you were finally able to tap into and witness.
Yeah, I get that perspective. I understand that perspective.
Who's to say?
And I admit that just because a camera can't take a picture of scent doesn't mean scent doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking about that the other day.
Just because I can't capture the data of his father being right next to him or my father being right next to me doesn't necessarily preclude it from being a real thing.
It's true.
I am skeptical of such perspectives because I see that it's tied into mindfulness and that it doesn't happen to everybody, and why wouldn't it? And just all these questions come up. Why did the angel choose the guy?
Right.
The one guy in the South Tower, all these questions pop up.
There is.
But I respect worldviews, so I'm not going to tell people not to believe what they want, but I don't believe it. All right, let's get into the evidence against. Now, the author who has recorded more than 200 of these, and he thinks there's a whole lot more, his name is John Geiger. He's an author and a researcher who studies encounters with what he calls the third man, and I believe he's the guy who coined the phrase the third man. He's documented more than 200 cases, and he speculates that the third man is really what people are seeing all the way through history when they think they've had interactions with angels, particularly guardian angels, because they tend to come up in these intense moments of stress and survival. Yeah, so he's the first one. But then we get into Professor Olaf Blank. And I loved his accent because he's Swedish. It's like all the cool neuroscientists are Swedish. They have that great accent. And he is a neuroscientist, a professor and a neuroscientist at Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. He performed an experiment, and this is on that National Geographic episode too, where there's a lady in a bed. And he didn't just do this with one person, but the one they show in that show is there's a lady in a bed, and they activate her parietal and lobe and temporal cortex and the junction that's between the two. And when they do that with just a very small charge, she instantly feels like there's a presence in the room, like between the bed and the floor.
Yeah, she kept like looking behind her or something, right?
She was looking for the presence. And he explains this. He says, look, the parietal lobe is responsible for internal spatial position. So you know where your hand is at, even if you can't see it, like it's behind you, because that lobe is doing the calculations.
My hand is in the cookie jar.
Yeah, you know
right
where
here.
it's at. And the temporal cortex is responsible for external spatial positioning. So you sitting in the chair, I can gauge your distance from me and the fact that I could punch you in the face if I wanted to because of that
I can
cortex.
bust his ass right now. He's right here.
That's right. So that part of the brain is responsible
Thanks,
for
John.
that anytime. And he refers to that area of the brain, if I'm getting the right spot. I'm doing this because they plugged it up to her right here. He calls it the angel switch. Because once you activate the parietal lobe, the temporal cortex, and the connectors in between the two, boom, suddenly people start sensing a presence in the room. The third man.
That is interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
And he thinks that the third man is caused by what he calls a computing error in the brain under stress. Like your brain is under all this stress when you're in a life and death situation. And so it starts to fail. Its calculations start to fail because it can't split its attention in enough ways to handle what's happening to you in the moment. And so it miscalculates where your own body is. And the way he put it, he says, I'm sitting right here. Am I sitting right here on this chair? Or am I sitting 2 meters away? And so your brain calculates that your body is actually a little offset from where it really is because under stress it starts to break down. Yep. And he says that's why you
go to primary functions.
And if you think about it, that does make logical sense because everything you experience is just a 3D model projected by your brain.
Energy pulls from this part of the brain, send it over here now.
Yep, that's what it is. And
prioritizes.
So he hypothesizes that since your brain is creating this 3D world model, it has a glitch under stress and it misplaces your own body.
That does make sense.
A little farther away. And that does make sense. It does make sense. And in the case of Schwab, she felt the presence of what she believed was her husband a few feet away. And that would make sense because her husband was very heavily in her thoughts at the time because he had just died.
Right.
So that's what he says. That's his explanation against it. And I think it's a pretty darn good one, personally.
I mean, our minds do have a habit, or seem to have a habit or tendency to rationalize what we want or justify what we want in our heads.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me that it was her husband.
Yeah. I really think that people forget that everything we experience is not objectively real. It is a 3D model created by our brain.
Oh God,
and
don't
guess
start
what?
that.
Your brain can glitch. It can make mistakes. It's not always right. It doesn't always get the data correct. And so it sets this third man off on the side.
How do we know we're perceiving the same thing?
There's no way to objectively prove it. We've had this conversation.
John was sitting here joking the other day, talking about, yes, I created you, Deasis.
You can't prove I didn't, right? You can't prove it. All right, the next guy you liked, Dr. Kim Kamler. He was the extreme medicine guy. You want to talk about him a little bit and what he did up on Everest, you remember?
Well, I think it's interesting because this is something that I was thinking of as I was watching it. The mind... It would make sense that the mind would give you something else to focus on.
Right.
Something that would keep you positive, focused, something that would get you moving in a certain direction. I mean, it's like the brain says, oh my God, I'm going to die. I need to create some kind of plan or diversion that works. Mm-hmm. Let me go ahead and mess with this, mess with his mind and get him to go over here so that he will take us to the food or the water or the shelter so that we survive. Because if we don't, we're going to die right now.
Like on Ghostbusters, when it's not Venkman, what's the the smart one's name again? Remind
Egon.
me. Egon. When Egon says, I'm terrified beyond the... How's he put it? I'm terrified beyond the ability for rational thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever they see the Stay Puft
Harold
Marshmallow Man,
Ramis.
I'm terrified beyond the whatever for rational thought. That's Ken Kamler's explanation. Having been, I mean, he was on Everest when that big storm hit and 8 people died and it was terrible. And they showed that in the episode. Wow.
Yeah.
And he dealt with all this. He says, you've never seen extreme survival mode because our butts are on cushy chairs. He's got something to drink.
Oh my God, I'm out of something to drink.
We got HVAC. You know, we don't experience survival moments
out of
very
Pedialyte.
often. And so he says we don't normally see these things, but when it happens, the parietal lobe partially shuts down, goes into a brownout, the temporal cortex starts to shut down too.
That's so crazy.
Triggering this third man response,
Yeah.
like you said, this objective thing that our brain's like, look, follow this guy. Follow this guy. You can't focus on your own pain and fear right now. Follow this guy. And it leads people out.
I think that happened a few times in Star Wars too, where they were, the images or, Force Ghost would appear, making him look that way and reach that way, so that help could come and rescue him.
You know what I want to know though?
What?
Why is it that it's always a third man?
It usually is.
And never a third woman. Like none of the examples I
Rarely.
could find, it's always a male figure, male-like being that's doing, it's never a woman. Now, when we covered shadow people, the shadow people were usually male, but that made sense to me because people are generally more afraid of a big, scary dude than they are of a woman just
I wouldn't be as
biologically.
scared as a hot shadow babe. I mean,
Yeah,
that's like, hey, whoa, okay, you know what? Come on in.
Men are bigger, men are stronger, men are more of a threat, biologically speaking. And so it makes sense shadow people would be male. So why aren't these saviors, these angels, these third men, why aren't they women? Because women are the nurturers, right? Generally speaking. Wouldn't it be the woman who's there to say, why is it always a man? Even with women, even with Schwab, it was a man. She thought it was her husband.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's interesting. Why don't women see these women saving them? Why? I get why a man would see a man, but why doesn't a woman see a woman? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, it's and granted, it's not always true, but it seems like it's generally true.
Generally
people
true.
see a male figure.
Yeah. Now, the last guy that's on the against side is Michael Persinger. Again, may he rest in peace. He died in 2018. He's super pioneer in this, and we talked about him in the parapsychology section. He modified a motorcycle helmet and had a very, very mild magnetic field pushed into people's temporal cortex. 80% of the people, 80% of the test subjects felt a presence in the room. And so his hypothesis is that it's the temporal lobe creating this third man. And what he said, and I really like this quote, see, he theorized that the third man is also a survival mechanism from humanity's early evolution triggered under extreme stress. Quote, before people realized the voices in their head were themselves, they attribute it to God. Because if you're in this really stressful situation, all of a sudden here's this person and they're speaking to you and you hear them and you're awake, what are you going to think? Yeah. You're not educated, you're caveman, whatever. What are you going to think? God. This is God speaking to me, trying to save me, one of the sons of God, like the Babylonian king said. And that makes sense to me because, like I said, in that hypnagogic state, you hear and see stuff as if it was real. So your brain's capable of creating that imagery and hearing those voices. So it makes sense that in high stress states, maybe the same thing would happen. Like you said, to give you a guiding post to focus on to get out of there.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It's your brain getting you out of that situation to preserve itself.
An interesting wrinkle on that, and we're going to do an episode on this too, is split brain syndrome.
Yes, man, I can't wait for that one.
Split brain syndrome plus the latest psychological understanding says that we don't just have one consciousness in our brain. It's at least two, and one of the researchers says we got at least 8. But they're all tied together and they create like a cohesive whole. Like when you're doing a potato sack race and you got 2 people's leg in there and you got to work together because you got no choice because you're bound together by the sack, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to run together. Well, that's what your brain's doing, but it's multiple people, consciousnesses.
Yeah.
And it would make sense that in a high stress situation where what you're normally used to dealing with, your present conscience shuts down out of fear or pain or whatever, the other one steps in and says, I got this. This is what you got to do.
I'm going to simplify it even more for our audience. Okay, you know how when somebody gets pissed off and they don't seem like they're the same person? And John actually told me about this. I didn't even know what the hell split brain was until one day we were on a trip riding somewhere and just talking for a while. But basically, you know how somebody will get angry and it's like, oh my God, it's like he's a different person when he's angry.
Right.
Well, you know, according to split brain theory,
you
they kind of are. Yeah. No, you go to a different part of your brain who is somebody else. Not the predominant part of your brain, but that other part of your brain, and that other part of your brain is another person. Or another consciousness.
And psychologists are starting
that is incredible.
To think that your brain is made up of modules. And each module takes over depending on what situation you're in.
Yeah.
Like when you're in a frightening situation, you have a certain module to deal with that. When you're working or dealing with numbers, you got a module to deal with that. Yeah. Whenever you're emotional, you're sad, you're happy, you're having sex, whatever, you've got a module to deal with that situation. And so you're not just one conscious, solid figure. You're a bunch of pieces that are working together depending on the situation.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And that would make this make sense. You hear voices, you see stuff. It's because the other part of your consciousness took over in order to try to save your butt.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah, we definitely got to do an episode on that soon.
Oh, we definitely will.
Yeah.
Well, that is everything we've got for and against angels. As always, we would love to know what you think, because have you seen angels? Have you experienced it? We would love to hear from you. We'd love to have you on the show to talk about it, what your experiences were. Why do you believe they were real? If you're skeptical, why are you skeptical? You know, let us know. We like to hear it. Definitely. And if you have any of those stories, just email us at the above email address and we'll definitely be in touch. Be sure to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification icons so you'll be notified when we create new videos. Thank you very much again for our patrons. And if you want to support us, you can support us at this address above, and the link's always down below. Helps us put out more ads, which are currently raising our subscriber count. Yeah. And we greatly appreciate it. Very much. Thanks for watching.
Perfect.